then Tomado, John Sando, Carchamuri. Saint Jean Tongi, Tata Doman, Ron in the Yoy. He Doman, Jobarze, Tabla, Tam around Songa, sending the Doman, Cap go with them.
Around to console Jacob.
Good. They don't think kinds now. That Coron Songa, don't be to give a loss of a kind of my sheep. Then Lincoln, Mumba. Then gave it a pen, big bag, lots of Gayon, my sheep, and Ben Chatham, Tom Road, some Jensen or the daughter of the Tati, or Gayon, my sheep, and Navy.
Before we set out with the teaching, it is again necessary to make sure that our motivation while listening to these teachings is the correct one. The correct motivation should, of course, be the one to bring about benefit and welfare and protection, for that matter, for all sentient beings. If we think about this, then we will come to see that it is apparent that all sentient beings, not a single one excluded, in one way or another are immersed in constant suffering. All beings constantly strive to experience happiness and try to avoid suffering to the best of their ability, yet they are ignorant about the means how to do so efficiently. Therefore, it should become our endeavor, it should become our wish from the bottom of our hearts that we'll be able to bring about lasting benefit and welfare for these beings, that we'll eventually be able to truly protect them from all the various causes that result in suffering for them. And with that motivation, we now set out to listen to the following instructions.
Senjin Tangji ke Samba Tang, Reva de Jipari. Madon Tondro Yana, Senjin Kandi Yana, Nala, Deva, Lula, Deva, Sana, Tumharma, Tatendra, Yigu, yo, song. This Senjin Tangji ke Samba Jipari. Then Lula Nasana, Sana, Tumharma, Deji Pasum Soba, Jokana, Dini, Yunguna, Maranta. Making a Samba Sambo, making a Pentoti, making a Nepadon Sibala Soba, Jimba Tang. That end our gave us our children, that is the Jipon so be jury. They are also drip here, your mares.
I forgot to say before, which you also said, in that regard, in as far as we do not, as beings, do not really know how to bring about lasting happiness, even though they wish to do so, how in this regard, as they're ignorant about the means how to do so, they are very much like the animals who are suffering from similar such ignorance. Now, as it has been said, all beings do indeed strive for happiness and try to avoid suffering, yet they are ignorant about how to do so. And we have heard about what it takes to bring about lasting happiness, to bring about lasting freedom from suffering and the causes thereof. It is that which allows us to strive from the very bottom of our hearts with friendliness, with an altruistic attitude towards beings, which brings about such lasting happiness, even though we know about that, even though we know that this is the case and that this is the root cause for lasting happiness in the first place. Even though we're in the know about this fact, yet we do not act in this way.
Nyamumba the church don't Naja Chado, Nyamumba told Nayora. Tea don't not take Mijamba Tupa Jet, Mijamba, so key, Mijamba Sino Tomti to Kumako. That is how momentary. Then they do that is the Pakas Hawaii. The deeper the Savatera, Tine, Tigan River, the Tangaron Sando, Donhamon, Yena Young, Domaki, Jutan Pang here, your minds.
As the Bodhisattva Shantideva has also very clearly said concerning these points, surely no being desires suffering, yet they all constantly amass the causes therefore, or accumulate the causes therefore. And this is something that we're all very familiar with. Of course, no one wishes suffering, no one wishes pain or any such disagreeable experience. Yet with all of our actions, with all of our deeds, we constantly cause ourselves and others more pain. We're highly expert in all of these disagreeable activities of lying, stealing, speaking the untruth, taking that which is not given, etc., and so forth. This is something we're all very familiar with, that's something we're very good at, that does not require any particular training. And in this way, we constantly, we and all other beings, constantly, while desiring happiness, cause ourselves and others more trouble, more pain, more suffering.
Somebody Devan Devi Yorete, Devi Juti Gavata Mahi, Mandepa de Dumare, the Dumanga Juti Dipa Mahi, some Josarani, Senjelo de Chaba. Tenda Senjin Tangi, Ninja Gambaka, Yorin, Song.
To say it again, we all intend to experience happiness, yet our deeds are absolutely contrary to that intention of ours. While we all think of happiness and while we constantly devise all sorts of schemes about how to bring about happiness, our deeds cause exactly the opposite. And not only we ourselves find ourselves immersed in this contradiction, but all other beings as well. Now, if we were to look at all of these beings who in such a way constantly act in contrary ways while intending the one thing, actually bringing about the other, these beings could become an object for our loving kindness and for our compassion. If we look at them and see how they constantly immerse themselves in more suffering while they actually intend the very opposite of that, that could be a cause for us to give rise to such compassion towards other beings.
Tene ngati tong dongki la soba te tongki pamala tene jewalen yorewa tene pamala tene jewalen chadu ta ngaru lu kandi chela lon pena rada ndabo kensin singe tong da tong zai tong den da we lu tang me ba lon ta ja da me lu tang me ba lon ta lu kandi lon na yang ti ge kap ta ngaranga Abati da Amage Narana Zewa Sambaka Jamurva. Pena Naranto, then dog Josela, Jewa Lona, then dog Amadeso, and Shalas of a ton, the Corona Pujila, Judo, so was it. They put on Jiggy, Dr. Tomita, Shakolunji, son, Amase, Shakolunji, Kosusa, son, the Tadova. Then Dr. Pugati, Tesala, Gensin Yambala, Soba, then the Pugata, never king a heaven, then Amati, Artini, not tell us some job second. Oh, Tandy, Zen Zawaka Jamuli. They do, then sentient Tongila, Tang Mapa, the sentient Tongila, Lu, Dramanda.
Because we have been behaving in such unskillful ways since beginning this time, we have been reborn time and again, countless times in all sorts of circumstances. There is not a single rum within the 6 classes in which we have not been reborn uncountable times, in which we have not innumerable times embodied ourselves in one or other form. There are, for instance, the various hell realms in which one is born, which are exceptional insofar as one is not being born through the circumstance of parents, of a father or a mother. Rebirth in hell realms, for all intents and purposes, happens in a miraculous or spontaneous way. One simply appears in the midst of all of that unspeakable suffering and suffers throughout one's lifetime until it's time to move on to somewhere else. But within all the other realms, there are outer circumstances which cause a birth. Either we've been born through an egg, or we've been born through the circumstance of heat and moisture, or we've been born through the body of a mother being, of whatever sort of being it was that we were born to. And so it would be that we have also been born many times within the animal realm. And also within the animal realm, whatever animal it was that we were born as, that particular mother that we had showed us great kindness, showed us great protection. For instance, imagine to have been born as a tiger cub. The mother, our mother, the tigress, would be extremely protective of us, would take great care to make sure that we are fed properly. She would go out and hunt and kill for us. She would bring the fresh meat of whatever animal she has killed so that we could eat and grow strong, etc. And whenever other animals would come and try to snatch that meat away from ourselves, she would defend us, she would protect us to the very best of her ability. And equally, it would have happened in all other sorts of births that we might have taken on. Whatever sort of being it might have been that we were at any given time, invariably our mothers would be kind, would be protective, would take care of ourselves in such a way that we have food and shelter, etc., and so forth. And because that is the case, that has invariably always been the case, we do indeed owe great thanks to all of these beings who invariably, throughout one lifetime or other, have been our loving and kind mothers.
Senjin jipa dong jipa, senjin zhigong dong denma, senjin tendawa nidong nasan denma, tendrila, jewa jima la ngarangi, senjin tela kang gugundu, pin toba shu, tendawa narang denma.
Also, jewa setup tamje tu
Kan jewa jima.
Jewa jima la.
Narang, paji shen chule undu, teni nepa tamji yang wala. Memang kibar lah nature. Jadi umum dan banyak jadi normal pun jembatan kami jadi. Tindawa yang masuk dan memang dem.
All of this clearly demonstrates that there is no reason whatsoever to harbor any ill will towards other beings, let alone act in any harmful ways. Rathermore, we should be protective of all of these beings who invariably have been our loving mothers in one lifetime or other. We should make all efforts to bring about their happiness and welfare. We should look towards them with kindness, with love. And we should constantly harbor the wish in the depths of our hearts that that eventually we will be able to help them in any which way is appropriate. And even if we're unable to do anything particularly much in this particular life, we could at least make prayers and aspirations that in the future may I be able to help these beings in any which way is necessary. May I be able to give whatever they need to the needy. May I be able to heal their sicknesses and diseases. May I be able to manifest as whatever is appropriate to alleviate their suffering. That should be the kind of thought, the kind of attitude that we should develop within ourselves towards other beings.
then labra lasso, tongue. That end of what's in around Pemasik, cutting Chambori. They do the Tata Kala, Aba Amala, Sem, Chipoyong, Tap, Song, around Aba Amasala, Roth, Metal lasso, but it is Aba Amala, Cor. Then Aba Amala, catching him, he, then Aba Amatesi, Kangandra, Nasandra, and then Maranga, Young Tapatel, Roquati. That and you could 10 hours Jena, then gave it our pain and Chambo Togri.
Now, all of this being clearly the case, it goes without saying that particularly our parents of this life are worthy of our particular attention. Concerning these parents of this life, we are indeed for the most part able to remember all the kindness that they have extended towards us. We do remember how they cared for us when we were small and helpless, when we couldn't do anything by ourselves, how they fed us, how they sheltered us, how they clothed us, etc. And also later on when we grew up a little bit, how they taught us, how they educated us, how to speak, how to talk, how they sent us to school and helped us there with whatever it was that we were studying, how we learned how to read and write, etc., how we actually owe our entire education to them. In this way, our parents in this very life have extended particularly great kindness to ourselves, and therefore we should take care of them as well in return. We should occasionally remember them, call them, go to see them, be friendly, ask after their well-being, occasionally bring a present, even if it's just a bunch of flowers. And needless to say, when our parents grow old and require our help, we should do our very best in order to help them in their old age.
And then George song noni, thinking, then you lasso, Ripa Kona, Combagi, thinking, then you do that, Jutella, Dini, David Younger. Young Denny, Jukana in Nayo, Jutella, Dini, David Chaparasapare Mado, Jumapa, David and Jagamares, Tella Dene, Maron Songa, then Gio Young Tapa, Dumna, Givik, Jutella, then Maron Son Tara Togeres, Dipa Mombosina, Dipik Jula, then Tinasonga, no one younger, that engine and Junge Tower, that he tower, Songi Tower, young Tabatiri.
I forgot to say before that Rinpoche said that if we were to act towards our parents in such a kind and considerate way, then that in itself is a cause for great merit, for the accumulation of great merit, that it brings about great merit for all beings, for all people concerned. Now, concerning all of these points, in our texts, condensing the essence of Atisha says that it is necessary for ourselves to cultivate the understanding that everything that appears and exists is subject to interdependent origination. As we have heard, everything depends on a cause. Only because of a cause something can come into being, and that holds true for both happiness as well as sadness or suffering. Just as all sorts of sufferings, etc., are being caused by deeds, also our happiness, all positive experiences are being caused through the coming together of circumstances. This is how the Buddha has taught it, and this is how Atisha in our text here also points it out very clearly. Only because circumstances come together, which in turn cause a result to appear, only because that is the case do appearances and phenomena, etc., and all sorts of perceptions and experiences come to be in the very first place. Buddha himself has expressed this in a famous word of his, which goes roughly like this. Non-virtue, avoid at all costs. Virtue, practice to perfection. Cultivate your mind stream completely. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So the Buddha himself has spoken these words, and what it means to say is simply that we have to become clear about the consequences of that which we do. If we want to avoid suffering, well, then we have to avoid negative deeds that bring about suffering. And if we wish to bring about happiness, if we wish to bring about positive things for ourselves as well as others, then we have to practice virtue to the very best of our ability. That is the very essence of the teaching of the Buddha.
And wrong is young so then I don't know, then Ludon, Martin, yet some your they end Penna, so the Jarbundawate, Sammy. You Bundawatella, Martin, then Lugelete, you Bundawate. They end then I don't know, send the joy and Naruga, send the Nyamumbaga so song. Lu ngõ đông yến như có tí gì xuân răng rồi. Ngã rú cái xem thế là xong bà đông nhìn dễ số xong ná ngõ đông lu như có tí gì xuân răng rồi. Thế là thế này xem thế xem này tôi chốt chém bồ đi.
The third line of this word of the Buddha, it is said, or the Buddha said, completely cultivate or completely tame your mind stream. Now, generally it is the case that where there is mind, there is also body and speech, and endowed with these we indeed find ourselves. There is that mind within that body of ours, we're endowed with speech as well, and there is constant interaction of these. However, Rinpoche says, mind or consciousness for that matter is to be regarded as the most important of these three aspects. It is to be regarded as the king, whereas one could liken speech and body to the servants of such a king. Depending on whatever our mental setup is at any given time, our speech and our body will express themselves. Therefore, if we were to tame that mind of ours, if we were to cultivate that mind stream of ours, then we don't need to worry about what speech and body are going to do, because it's going to be according to however we have cultivated or tamed that mind of ours. Therefore, taming one's mind stream, cultivating one's mind stream is of the utmost importance.
Rang yin ge yu ya ba zan ni sen la da bu me ba ni che ji yo ma a rong chong ge chom chong na ga du zhen na yang sen ge sen la da gu sen na rang ge sen de kan ri re ge du na rang ge sen de kan che du ga rong sen de je ko ma ko du ge ga rong sen de chu pa je wu du ge I don't think it's a tagore. Then row cups in a young, then you got to train us, Sampson, doggy tongue, then you don't ship up in a young, then you got to train some, then Sampson, Jetta. Then you summons our cup in a young tender, Sampson, da. Then you go. Then you Sampson, Tadu. They bought me give out a number of last over the shed down to the moment, that they found a song over it, the bucket sauce of Java. That same good son, that Naru Sana, Tepado, Mudu, Sandruto, Hinjit and Dona, then I don't get Drupsai song over it. Then it do gentle, same good son, Tina, so that jumbo gums, I will tell you. They can't do you that same as an Tagro.
Such a jumbo comes then the deal.
Such a jumbo comes and Maru Sanguisan Tawati.
So we have heard that of body, speech, and mind, or consciousness for that matter, mind or consciousness is the most important thing. That means to say that That does not mean to say that we should let this consciousness or this mind go utterly unchecked, allow it to do whatever it wishes to do without keeping an eye on it. Rather, we should endeavor to constantly keep a rather close eye on it, because otherwise it might just run away and go about all sorts of unwholesome activities that we might not even be aware of it. Therefore, it helps to occasionally watch this mind of ours, this consciousness of ours, and check what it is up to at any given moment. Particularly when we go about our daily activities, be this eating or walking or whatever it is, it will be very helpful to keep an eye on this mind and examine it as to what its particular mode of being is, what its particular setup is at any given time. This is indeed immensely helpful. Whenever we do whatever it is that we are active with all day long, it is helpful to be mindful of what is going on there. When talking with someone about something, it is immensely helpful to know what you're talking about, to keep an eye on that, what your mouth, what your speech is doing, which in the end derives from mind in the first place. Or when, as Rinpoche added, when all sorts of stealthy little thoughts turn up in your mind, for instance, somewhere at the edge of your mind there creeps up that idea of taking something that is not truly yours, of stealing something. Then, for instance, one should actually say it out loud. One should say, well, wouldn't you believe it? I just had this idea of stealing something now. Ain't that strange? The positive result of doing so is that the force of such an idea is then eroded, and we will not let it evolve into an actual action or into an activity. Therefore, checking our minds at all times, allowing this consciousness to watch itself, allowing mind to keep a check on mind, to look at mind at any given moment during any activity, whether we're walking or whether we're talking, whether we're eating or whatever it might be. That is, as it is called, the Mahamudra way of allowing mind to keep a check on mind.
Tilopa,
how beneficial it is to keep a watch on mind, keep a close watch on one's mind in any given situation during any given activity is exemplified by the story of the great Mahasiddha Tilopa. Tilopa, who lived in ancient India, was known to have been the servant of a prostitute for 12 years, and he brought her customers, while at other times he was busy pounding sesame. No matter what it was that he did, no matter what it was that he was involved with at any given time, he constantly checked his mind, he constantly watched mind as to what was going on within it or not. And at the end, it is said he then eventually achieved the great awakening, the great realization of Mahamudra. So in this way, this exemplifies very clearly how keeping a close watch on mind is indeed extremely beneficial.
Dorjen Chongli, something tani, Elon Naroma, Malanima, Jayum, Damba Chepartina, Naron Sona, Yori, Tata Dama, Nyong, Mari, Naron Sona, Yori. Sengenilu, Naron to Tongi, Yori. They ended that Charon song, then eating Geleka Lena, young, Semling, Semna, Tani, Taki, Tanga, then got the then suggestion what there's more train. Then you know, Mugumari. Then you Nala Chankari, Na Chari to the day, Na, and then more than the same Martin.
Just like Tilopa was going about a very simple livelihood, many of the other great Mahasiddhas of India and also later of Tibet did so similar. There were some who were shoemakers all of their life, or others were weaving fabrics. Whatever it is that they did, they used the time while doing whatever it was they were doing to constantly watch their mind, to constantly familiarize themselves more and more with mind nature. And eventually through doing so constantly, while being busy with all sorts of different activities, which were of secondary importance of course, they eventually achieved awakening. They eventually realized that which is known as Mahamudra. Now when we look at our particular transmission lineage, we start out by praying to the great Buddha Vajradhara, who is then followed by the Mahasiddha Tilopa, followed by his main student Naropa, then follows Marpa, Milarepa, etc. So all of these great masters have indeed appeared. The instructions, the teachings, which allowed all of these great masters to achieve the full awakening, to realize Mahamudra, to actually truly demonstrate the achievement of enlightenment. Also, these instructions are still extant. They are still existent in this world. They exist in an unbroken and an undiluted lineage. So all of that is at our disposal. At the same time, our own mind nature, the very nature of that mind or consciousness of ours, is not an iota different from that of the great masters of the past. So what is it that we lack? Why have we not yet achieved the same awakening, the same realization that they have achieved? It is because we lack practice. We have to put these teachings into practice. We have to familiarize ourselves with them, and we have to practice them ideally in any given situation at any given moment. And if we were to do so, then indeed eventually that great awakening, that realization of Mahamudra, that complete actualization of that which is called the enlightenment of Buddhahood will then eventually come to pass. If that is the case, then indeed all necessity for complaining about this and hankering after that and being unhappy after such and such circumstances, etc., all of that will then become utterly unnecessary, because then we will have actualized, we will have fully realized mind nature, that which is also otherwise known as Mahamudra. I'm flying as usual. However, if there are any questions, we have time for a few short ones.